Annie, welcome to Locked In. We met a few weeks ago. You came in through a mutual friend, and you wanted to start a podcast, and then you happen to have an interesting story too. So we invited you on the show, and now here we are. And you're a Connecticut local.
I am.
You live in the area.
I'm a native.
You're a native.
Born and raised.
Yeah, it's so fascinating when that people have so many interesting stories in such like a close proximity of where we're filming the podcast.
I believe that the universe is aligning, and I feel like I'm walking in my purpose, finally. It took a couple of trials and tribulations, but I'm here, and it's nice to meet you, and thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. So did you grow up in Connecticut?
I did. I was born and raised in Danbury.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, like me.
No, you too?
Well, I was born in Manhattan, but we lived here our whole life.
My family, my mom's an immigrant, but when her and her family came, they came to New York. I guess it's a thing. They come to New York, and then, funny story, I had two uncles who owned like a bodega in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And one day, these kids or these men came in with like masks and a gun and robbed one of my uncles at gunpoint. And then the next day, my other uncle went and bought a gun. And my other uncle was like, fuck this. I'm selling this. I'm moving. We're moving. And everyone's like, where are we moving to? Connecticut. I always wondered how my life would be different if I was raised. I would go to New York on like the summers, to visit family and stuff like that. But if I was raised in New York, do you ever wonder that?
Yeah, I mean, I was actually talking to someone last week about living in New York City, and I think it just makes you tougher. You get a different childhood experience.
Absolutely.
So it makes you more independent and a lot tougher, and you definitely miss out on the way you would grow up in, say, Danbury or in the suburbs.
I feel like, luckily, I was always curious. I was always a curious kid, so I wasn't as sheltered. And I'm thankful for that now because, like, a lot of my cousins that really had to grow up in, like, the projects, like, in the Lower East Side, or wherever they were raised, they had it tougher. With the schools, with growing up, addictions, unless you're like really, really strong-willed and you just know what you want from a diaper, it's hard to easily get pulled. I'm going through that now with my daughter. And even though Danbury now is not how Danbury used to be. Do you know that, right?
Well, I don't know. I'm seeing a new side of Danbury recently because I started mentoring some children that are going through the probation department, juveniles, really? And, some of their cases, like gang involved, shootings. Yeah. We didn't have that. And when I was growing up, we had, some, I guess, quote unquote, race wars that they would call it in high school, but no one was bringing, a gun to school or anything. And now, a couple of years ago, there was a shooting at the mall where a gun went off. And,
I heard of that.
There's stabbings and people dying, and these teenagers are getting guns. It's crazy.
When I lived over here at those condos, there was teenage kids robbing cars and leaving them parked there. This was a thing where they were selling the cars, or someone was paying them and they were taking the parts or whatever they do when you rob these cars. And they were when I found out how old these kids were, they were 14, 15, 16. They were kids. So, and I have a goddaughter who's 20 now. And my daughter's 15. And the things that I hear from my daughter, the things that I hear from my goddaughter, it's sad. Even the things that my daughter and my goddaughter are experiencing, the things they're going through, you really, really, really have to have tough skin, and you really, really, really have to have a relationship with your children. Sometimes I know it's hard to really connect with your children if you're a single parent, or if you come from a household from two parents and you guys both work, or if you're a stay-at-home mom or a stay-at-home dad and, you're keeping up with the house, you're keeping up with the kids. It's hard to and if you have more than one child, I can only imagine. But it's so important to balance and to make sure that you're pouring into your children. I always say you teach them You teach them well and watch them lead the way. Like, the children are the future.
Yeah, I mean, what I've learned recently from the show and interviewing people, I think it 100% has to do with where you're coming from, like, environment-wise.
Absolutely.
Because if you take two kids, like I went to Danbury High School, and say one of these individuals that I was just referring to, both go to Danbury High School, because sometimes people blame the school or they'll blame the police or whatever. And if we're coming from the same town, the same area, I don't think the school is the problem. Then you look at the outer layer, is the police the problem, you know? And maybe they are, maybe they're not. I don't know what the crime rates are exactly. But then you look at the backgrounds that individuals are coming from. And I'm not saying whether you come from money or not, because in this show we've seen people come from great families that have fallen into addiction or crime, or vice versa. And there's people that come from no money that make it, that are successful, and vice versa. So I think it has to do with what you were saying about parenting and having that relationship. It all stems from that environment, whether the parents there, whether the parents incarcerated, what that situation is.
You have to have love. You have to have a home. I don't care if you were raised in a studio apartment or if you were raised in $1 million home. You have to make your home a home. And it starts with love. And I feel like that's what a lot of kids that end up becoming adults are missing. And you see it. Like, you see it now, you know, with dating, with just people, with, like, on one hand, how many friends could you say you have that you could call in the middle of the night? God forbid there's an emergency. Or if you just need someone to vent to or talk to. You know, people aren't as compassionate as we once were. And I think that's what we're all missing a little bit more of. Just being a good person. It costs you nothing to be a good person. It costs you nothing to do a good deed every day. It costs you nothing to just, you see someone sad one day, or like sometimes randomly I do it in little ways. Like, I'll be at Dunkin' Donuts and I'll be like, hey, I want to get the person behind me whatever they just ordered, you know? Like, someone did that to me one time and I was having like the shittiest day. You heard that horn, that was confirmation. And someone I went to pay, I was like, how much? I'm like almost in tears. And they're like, oh, that guy, or it was a woman, I think it was a woman. She's like, she took care of it. I'm like, and then it just melted my heart. And I'm like, God, I'm so blessed. What am I really complaining about?
Yeah. I mean, and a lot of it's morals too, like having those parents to bring you up on morals. And like these individuals, this was my first week with them, and I took them to get food and to get a haircut, and they don't even really say like, thank you. And you realize where that comes from.
How you were raised.
You know, how you're raised.
How old are they?
They're 116 and 117.
So how do you tell them that politely? Like, hey, you know.
I think it's more of because I've seen people say, oh, you have to do that, like give orders. And I personally think that's not the way to learn. I think you show by actions. And the more time, like I'm investing my time into spending time with them and showing them like this studio, that this came from a bad experience, but there's good in it. Now, if you take out the bad experience, you show them the opportunity. And it's also training and showing individuals that you don't need college to be successful, that you can do all these different things, and that, you know, there's a different way of looking at the world. So I can also relate to them because I was in their shoes. I was on house arrest. I was in prison. I got into trouble, not for anything like they got in trouble for, but I've been down their path. I heard about
your story a little bit. I looked in. I did a little bit of homework.
Yeah.
You have a very interesting story.
I lived a lot, you know, at a very
young age.
Yeah.
I give it to you. You were like advanced. Your mind was like out there.
Yeah. I just, a lot of my decisions were based on, you know, money. Like it had to do with being in a tough financial position. When you're in a tough financial position, you make bad choices. It was never for the wrong reasons. It was just, you know, I was dealt a shitty hand by my own doing, and I made decisions, but they turned out to be the best thing that could ever happen to me. And so now here we are, and now I just want to, you know, I'm very big on trying to give back to the community because I think that the system is doing it the wrong way. We're going to take a quick pause, you guys, to talk about Magic Mind, one of the sponsors for today's episode. Guys, you need to give Magic Mind a try. And with the promo code LOCKEDIN, you can get up to 56% off your order. I'm going to have a link in the description of this episode that brings you directly to the page where you could check out Magic Mind. Once you order your Magic Mind, you're going to get a package just like this. They are these little energy matcha shots. And yes, they taste great too. I personally drink these as many as I can throughout the week. And I like to keep these puppies in the fridge available for all of our guests that come on the show. These things are quick energy shots. You just pop one in your mouth in the morning, at night, in the afternoon, before the gym, whenever. They'll help you relax, de-stress, and help you function better throughout the day. So guys, give Magic Mind a try. Whenever you get a chance, go to the description of this episode, click on that link, and order your subscription to Magic Mind.
I've been speaking on this for at least a week now. The system wasn't meant for us. If you're high up, maybe sometimes, but for just day-to-day Americans, the system was not made for us. And prisons. So it's like you go to prison, right? Let's say it's nonviolence. So drugs, for instance, right? So now you're a felon. After you serve your time, you come home, now you're a felon. So whether you have work experience or you don't, or you had a degree before you went in, but you're a felon now. So now 95% of those jobs that are out there that are hiring aren't going to hire you because now you have this label. Instead of, yes, a crime is a crime, But like you said, you never did what you did with bad intention. To me, it was like you were just on survival mode. You were trying to branch out. You were trying to do things in a way that you didn't get enough knowledge on, And what did they do? Okay, they gave you prison time. Did they consider your age? Did they consider your background? No, they don't care. The system does not care. Look at what's happening in Rikers. I feel like prisons, jails, they should take the time to really, and I feel like in schools too, they should offer more than mentors to all the students, to all the individuals, or this should come a package. In the school, they should have a therapist. I feel like it's very important to speak to someone who's not judging you, who doesn't know you, who can guide you, or sometimes we're not raised, like you said, the kids that you're tutoring, mentoring, they don't say thank you. You took them to get a haircut. Mm-hmm. You know how many, I take my son to get all his haircuts. And I see other moms there too, and I'm just I feel bad for the kids that don't have their dads around, And it's you took these boys to get a haircut. It's the little things, And they couldn't even say thank you. I feel like that in prisons, they should make it more of a adult institute. It shouldn't be prison, a rat, in a cage. It should be more how can we help you make better decisions? How can we enlighten you, empower you to be the man? What's your calling? Let's dig deep. Let's let go of the trauma. The other day, it was my son just graduated kindergarten, and his father's not here. My son graduated preschool last year, and his father, unfortunately, wasn't able to be there. And, now that I'm a single mom playing mom and dad in my home, I find myself juggling and pouring more into I was doing a lot of healing and a lot of self-reflection, and how I can better my family's situation and how I can pour into theirs. But you can't pour into someone's cup if you're pouring from an empty cup.
Yeah.
So I found myself drained. I found myself very lost. And I'm going through my son's book bag, and it was field day. Do you remember field day when you were younger?
Yeah, of course. So we always had field
Wasn't it
yeah.
the best day of the year?
That was at the end of the
Oh my God. I used to love doing the little balloon, hopping in the potato bag, things from when you were innocent, right?
The good old days.
Yes, the good old days, right? No responsibilities. And I volunteered. And this was Monday or Tuesday. And I forgot, my mind is spinning. I have so much going on, you know, like now I'm like, as I'm adulting, I'm writing my agenda down, writing my planner out, writing my week out. I forgot that it was my son's field day. So when I get to the school, the teacher's like, I'm like, what? She's like, it's field day. I'm like, oh my God. Oh yeah, that's right. I'm not even in sneakers. I'm in like flip-flops. I'm sliding all over the fields. But it was seeing my son's face and his classmates was priceless. And it just reminded me that it really takes a village. It takes a village to pour into these children. It takes a village to... There was this kid that my son was always complaining about, like, Mom, he's always pushing me, he's always mean to me. And I noticed the kid was, like, angry. And he was, like, looking around, trying to see, like, if he saw, like, his mom or dad, I think. And I noticed he was just angry. And at one point, he couldn't, like, get his feet in the bag. And he was, like, kicking the bag, throwing the bag. Like, the little boy was so angry. And I was like, here, I'll help you. And I'm, like, helping him get in the bag. And he looked at me. You know what he said? Thank you. I'm like, oh, he's a sweet boy. He's just, but why is he so angry? He has to be like 5 or 6. You know, and that kind of like, it just goes to say, it really does take a village.
Yeah.
And my daughter's father did 10 years federal. He came home when she was 10. You know, I had my daughter as a teenager, and I was just on survival mode. I'm like, oh my God, now I'm like, Mom, I didn't look at it like mom and dad, but I'm like, oh my God, now, you know, what am I gonna do? How am I gonna like raise my daughter? Thank God I have a mother and a brother that were like super, super always supportive and fell in love with my daughter, and her godmother was great too, treated her like their own. You know, not everyone has. I give it to these parents, these single parents that don't have help. I don't know how they do it, but they do it. They figure it out, you know. I give it to them. I applaud them. Because seeing that field day, it just reminded me, like, you know what? I am doing a great job. Regardless of what it looks like from the outside to others, I know what the sacrifices that I'm taking. And my children do know their manners, and they are polite. And my kids are super, super sweet. And that makes me very proud. Like, my son, he's so helpful. He was helping other kids. He's like, here. Like, he's such, like, a little man, you know? He holds the doors for me. He's like, no, Mom, you go. Like, he's a little gentleman, you know? And I'm happy that he's being raised like that because, like you said, the kids are missing that. Yeah. This generation, for sure, is missing it. This generation right here, I wasn't a saint growing up. Like, I wasn't. I'm not going to sit here and paint a picture like, no. There's things that I wouldn't change anything because I wouldn't be here right now in my life, like, in this position of, like, where I see God taking it. But, of course, there was things that you probably, you know, however, you would have chose this, like, A instead of going C or B, you know? But sometimes we dig these own rabbit holes for, like you said, like, how you ended up in prison. You dug your own rabbit hole, right? Did you mean to? No. I feel like we become lost when we're not grounded. And that's something that, like, I'm tapping into now. And that's something that, like, I'm trying to show my kids.
Yeah, I mean, everyone in this world has made a mistake that could have landed them in prison and got them into trouble. And I think you have a super interesting perspective because you are someone that often goes unrepresented in, say, the criminal justice system. Obviously, they hear the wife and the kids speak at, like, a sentencing, but it's not like the news is necessarily interviewing you unless you're a high-profile case to say what your story is. And oftentimes when an individual gets incarcerated, like a husband or a wife, they have an immediate effect on that family. So you're a clear representation of what kind of, like, navigating that life after, you know, losing someone to the criminal justice system.
It's a loss. It really is a loss. It was a loss for me. It was a loss for my daughter's father. It was a loss for his oldest daughter. It was a loss for his mother. His mother and his father both got very ill. his sister, his brother, his niece that he left at that time. You know, it's a loss for his friends that stuck around. You know, it's a loss. And whether people knew or didn't know, everyone was trying to, I had no idea. When I met my daughter's father, he was my cousin, my older cousin's husband's now best friend growing up. So I met him when I was like 12 years old at my grandmother's like 85th birthday party. And he was just funny. I just remember him being funny, right? Not my type, but super funny. Like, he was hilarious. Sometimes really all you need is come up with a few jokes. You could probably, you know, get the girl you want. Seriously, I couldn't stop laughing with him. That's one thing that he is very funny till this day, even though he gets on my nerves. But, you know, you don't realize the damage you do on the outside. And I feel bad, terrible for my daughter now. So when her dad got arrested, she was 8 months. He came home when she was 10. And he had to start literally from zero, you know? And his parents, he's Puerto Rican. His parents were immigrants. He came here, I think, when he was like 12, 13. You know, he didn't even know how to write. He didn't really know how to but he was like in church. He was very with the piano, crazy, super talented naturally. He just like picked up on it. And I think with his first daughter, he just, I don't know where he went left, but he made poor decisions that got him into the trouble that he got to when I had my daughter. And he had a car dealership at the time. Like, this guy could sell water to a well. It was like, I think it was his friends, but he was working there. And he was good. Like, when I tell you, he had like the hustler's mouth. Like, he has it naturally in him. But sometimes you get desperate. Sometimes you lose the sight of the bigger picture. And you have to walk before you run. You know, you have to start somewhere. But just if you're doing it with your heart, if it's something you're happy getting up every morning and doing it, you're going to continue to do it. And one day it's just going to take off. And you're going to look back and be like, yeah, I started really, really small. And look how big I grew, you know?
Do you think selfishness plays a role in these actions? Because if he had taken a second to think, like, I have a daughter on the way, I have a daughter from my last relationship, I have this woman in my life, let me stop doing what I'm doing and adjust so this doesn't end badly. Do you think that it plays a part in it?
So I think it starts from a good place, not necessarily like the hustle. And then it becomes more like selfish, or maybe it becomes greedy, then selfish. And then it becomes more like an ego. And when people are so ego-driven, they lose the sight of the big picture. They lose the sight of, I seen this man be into church. And then I remember, like, when I was with him still, telling him, like, please, let's go to church. Like, on Sunday, can we go? And he would be like, yeah, selling me a dream. Sunday would come. I remember one day, I will never forgive him for this. He took my car keys and put them in a safe. So I couldn't go to church. I realize now that that was like the enemy, like the devil having a hold on him. Because that man would not go to church. And I remember one day being like, why don't you want to go to church? And he's like, I don't feel right. I'm like, but Jesus, if we're talking like biblical or whatever, like, he wasn't hanging out at church. He was hanging out with the people who needed God, the people who needed guidance, the people that gave up on him. Like, let's go to church. He just wouldn't go. And I don't think it really hit him on everything that he was missing with his family, and so he was in there. And I was so young, I wasn't looking like, oh my God, my daughter's gonna be 10 when he comes home. It completely made me almost give up on God. I wasn't raised with a father. my mother, like I said, she was an immigrant when she came here. Shout out to my mother because I love her to pieces. And she did try to give me and my brother the best she knew how to. We all make poor decisions when we're lost, you know? And then, like, coming to this country, like, if you're an immigrant, if you come to this country, you feel like you made it. And then I feel like it's the ego. Sometimes it gets the best of you. I've seen it happen all the time. And I feel like my mom lost sight of, like, well, she didn't really have it. Growing up, her father was always, my mother grew up very poor. My grandfather used to just, I don't know, he would just roam the streets like a dog. Like, what's that saying? Like, give a dog a bone. Like, he would just come home. He would leave. My mom would tell me that he would leave and come back like every 3 months, 6 months, like whenever he wanted to. But my grandmother was married 3 times, and she just kind of like not settled, but she's like, whatever, it is what it is, you know? But when my mother was young, she was very, very, very hard, especially on my mother. You know, my mother told me some things that I remember when I was younger. I'm like, so why do you speak to her? If she treated you like this, or if she did this to you, or, you know, to this day, my mother has trauma behind it that she never healed from. And I noticed that growing up, like I said, my mother did her best, but there wasn't love. There was never like a home. I kind of raised myself. And at the time, it was me and my cousin, Jeffrey. We were like the younger ones, and he was older than me, like by a year or 2. And it was just like us on survival mode. Like, you ever grew up in a house? Me and my cousins, we all grew up super, super close, like brothers and sisters. There would be like peanut butter, no jelly, milk, no cereal. Like, it was one thing, but we never had a full meal. So we just had to like make it work. Like, I remember eating salchichas like out of the cans, or like trying to cook something. I'm like 7 years old trying to cook something on a chair, like telling him to like pass me stuff.
Or like the Vienna sausages in
Yes.
the can. Those things slap. I remember
It
those.
really did. I remember one day we wanted something sweet, and we like finished the change. So I'm like, damn, there was like Pepto Bismol. This is so nasty. We were like taking it like it was like the bubblegum flavor. I could never now, but like, you know, so we made it work. And so there was not love, you know. And I think my grandmother, though, because maybe she was tough on my mother, but later on in life, she gave her life to God completely. And she was Catholic. And I got this for her, actually, when she passed away. And she installed in me and all my cousins, like, just having respect and having morals and principles and just saying thank you, you know, or excuse me, or holding the door, just having good gestures. Like, she made us all be better people. And it's funny, Memorial Weekend, my cousin, I have one cousin, I love her, that lives local, and her and her husband did like a nice barbecue at the home. And we were talking about that. And rest in peace to both of my grandparents, because they're not here anymore. But my grandmother did. My grandmother, like, she showered us with love. It's so true what they say, like, the grandparents spoiling. Like, she didn't spoil us, but she spoiled us with love. She would make us pray. Oh my God, we did the rosary. I was like 5 years old on my knees. She was not playing. Everybody had to be on their knees for like an hour doing the rosary. And we all went around and like, you know, and I appreciate that now.
It helped make you who you are today and how you raise your kid.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
What's it like to be in that situation where, so like the average person, if you're dating someone or you're married to someone with no kids and you have a significant other that gets arrested or goes to jail, you can cut ties without a second thought. But in the situation where you have a child involved, you're kind of thrown into something that you didn't sign up for, where it's like you have to, you know, really think about staying with this individual, whether it's a husband or a wife, and put what they did aside for the betterment of your child's growth and how they grow up. What's that like for you to be in that position, and what decision did you ultimately pick?
So it's kind of different for both of my children, because for my daughter, I was a lot younger. For my son, you know, I'm in my 30s now, and it's different now. But with my daughter, I loved her dad. And I was devastated. I remember, like, I wouldn't get out of bed. I was depressed. My family was like, maybe you need to get away for a little bit. They sent me to Dominican Republic, and my aunt, she laughs about it to this day. She was like, you were just rocking on the chair, like, in the patio. Like, from the whole time that I was there, like, I was just so depressed. I didn't want to eat, didn't want to get out of bed. And I'm like, oh my God, 10 years. And I just had to put my big girl panties on, and I had to figure it out. And I didn't really have, like, a plan. I think the plan was money. You know how you felt like you just wanted to make money? I feel like I just needed to make money. And when I got back to the States after coming back from DR, and I made some poor decisions. At the time, because I don't knock no one's hustle, like, I didn't get a chance to go to college. I had my daughter young, and, you know, growing up where I'm from, it's like the man, seeing my uncles, how they are with their wives, and how my mom, like, you know, like, whether the woman wants to work or follow a career, I do believe, like, the man should be the provider, you know, and the woman should take care of home. But nowadays we're living in a society where, like, that, I don't even know if you have that, God bless you. But you really, as a woman now, I give it to the women that are stepping up. And I have some amazing women friends that are, like, boss bitches, respectfully. Like, they're doing their thing, you know. But for my daughter and my situation, like, I remember when my daughter was, like, 5, and there was, like, a daddy and daughter dance. And I remember this just, like, breaking my heart. Like, my brother, thank God for my brother, he ended up going with her. But when she got home, she was like, Mom, where's my dad? And I remember having this, like, you know, conversation with him. Like, he's like, I think I should tell her. I'm like, no, we're not going to tell her. And he's like, I think we should tell her. And I was like, no, we're not going to tell her. And he's like, yeah, but every time she tells me, she asks me, like, when is she going to see me? When is she going to see me? And so he was federal. When she was younger, like, they used to have him in Valhalla. But then, like, I feel like after he got sentenced, he was, like, everywhere. Like, Texas or wherever, they would, like, just move him around. And it got harder to go see him. But when he was younger, it was a little easier because it was more local. So one day, she comes and she's like, Mom, Dad's in jail. I'm like, oh, I wanted to kill him. But you know what? It actually, she, like, understood. Like, she didn't know why. She just knew that Daddy did something he shouldn't have done. And now he has to, you know, take the consequence that came with it. But, like, he loves her, and he's going to call her every day. And if Mommy can bring her to see her, like, Mommy will. And that she has, like, a father that loves. And he used to call every day. And he built an amazing relationship with my daughter that, like, some kids don't even have with their dads, maybe because they're working or whatever the case is. Like, she's a daddy's girl for sure. But, you know, when I got with my son's father, we were together for, like, 4 or 5 years without having a kid. And my daughter was, like, 5 or 6 when I met him. And my daughter was born hard of hearing. But they didn't tell me this in the hospital. I discovered I didn't know if it was, like, her speech or hearing. And after we went through all the analysts, they told me she was 50% like loss of hearing. And going through that alone, you know, like, I remember they had to put her on anesthesia, and going through that alone, and, like, me being like, God, how come, like, why am I going through this alone? Like, I didn't picture, you know, being raised without a father. Like, I didn't picture me having a kid, and now here I am raising a kid alone. But unlike my father chose not to be in my life. Her father chose to be in her life, but because of one choice, now he has to pay 10 years of not being in her life. I don't think that's fair.
Was it ever a thought to keep her away from him? Because
Never.
You didn't want her exposed to that environment?
Never, because I always say if, like, the father wants to be a father, you have to let him. Like, I hate when I hear stories of like, I don't have either of their fathers on like child support or any of that. Like, I never did. I just feel like if you want to be a father, you're going to be a father. One day they're going to get older and they're going to see you for who you are, you know? And as long as he wanted to be a part of her life, however he could, I respected it.
And once she found out once she found out that he was in prison, how did that dynamic change? Did she look any differently at him?
No, I don't. Maybe because he hit it in the nail, like maybe 5 is like a prime age. And I remember when I started dating my son's father, like, she's like, you're not my dad. My dad is in jail. Like, I'm like, oh my God. Like,
oh, that's actually very interesting, because what's it like to date when the guy finds out that the child's father is in prison to begin with? Because that could be intimidating for a guy that has no kids, that is already intimidated by a single mother.
I think that was definitely, it's always like the question you get. Like, oh, where's her dad? So, like, it didn't work out. Were you guys married? Did you get divorced? Like, is he an active dad? Is he proactive? Is he not? Like, you know what? And, you know, I'm very honest. I try to be as transparent, but, like, not overshare, but, like, you know, just enough. And I'm honest. I'm like, he's in prison, you know. Later on, like, I never been the type to bring a whole bunch of men around my children unless I knew, like, this is it, we're serious, we're locked in. I never, like, growing up, I had a lot of uncles that would, like, disappear, that my mom would, like, bring around. She's like, oh, that's your Uncle Jose, that's your Uncle Tom, that's your Uncle whatever, George. Like, and, you know, sometimes you get attached and then Uncle George stops coming over and you're like, damn, where did Uncle George go? And now, like, I give it to my mom now because it's not easy. It's not easy being a single mom and dating and trying to find balance. But so for my daughter, the first man she met was my son's father. And luckily for me, he was very, like, understanding. And he was like, I don't want to be your dad, you know? And I would never, like, one day she calls him dad. He ended up, like, growing on her, you know? And he, like, corrected her, but, like, I forgot exactly what he said. He's like, no, like, maybe I'll be dad number 2, but you have your dad and your dad loves you. And she's like, okay. And when I got the hearing aids for her, finally, like, when she was, like, 5, so she went, like, 5 years without language, he was so, like, hands-on. He was researching things, like, how to enable her, how to make her, like, you know, live, like, how to prosper in life. He was like, oh, we got to get her a speech pathologist. We got to do this. I'm like, what is that? And he's like, don't worry. I looked at the best one in the area. And he was, like, on top of it, you know? And we never made her feel like she couldn't do anything, you know? Like, we always pushed her to her limits. And, you know, she's amazing now. But she's another one. She doesn't really want to go to college. And that's okay, because I don't believe college is for everyone. I think college is kind of a gimmick, you know? But unless you know 100%, like, you want to be, like, a doctor or a lawyer, then obviously, yes, you need advanced and high-level training, and you have to get degrees to go, you know, to get to that point. But I feel like, you know, the other day she told me something like, you know, I look at my son's father, Kenny. I look at Kenny like my dad. You know, my dad wasn't here for 10 years, remember? I'm like, no, you know your dad loves you. She was like, yeah, but Kenny was my dad. Kenny was there for me. Kenny was there for me. He was always, like, at, like, my ballet. He was always here. He was always there. He was always like, Mom, she just starts crying. And, you know, since she's older, I was like, look. And then I start crying, and we're just crying, 2 crybabies. And I'm like, Kenny might be away for a while. And that was really hard. But I think that's when it, like, hit me, too, that I'm going through this again, you know?
Yeah, that's another insanely interesting aspect of your story, is that you had the strength to go through this all the first time, and then now you're thrown into it again. How does that make you feel? Like, do you feel like that's the universe telling you something?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I've never been, you know what's crazy? I was so angry at first. I really didn't notice that I was so angry. Like, everything happened so fast, you know? But God's been like talking to me for like a while. And I thought that God spoke to everyone. And I told my mom this because I thought when you prayed, God spoke to you. Like, you had answers. I don't know. That's how I was raised feeling. And I remember like God never spoke to me. So I'm just like, you know, I told you I stopped believing in God for a long time. I remember telling my mom, like, there's no God. My dad wasn't around. My dad didn't love me. There's no God. You know, my daughter's father's in jail. There's no God. Like, why has my life been so difficult? Like, how come things aren't working out in my favor? And then when my son's father went to jail, like I said, we were on and off. Like, when I got pregnant, I think he felt like, oh, I got her now. Like, she's not going anywhere. And he was wrong. Like, I just wasn't having it anymore. I wasn't dealing with it. I already dealt with enough. He put me through a lot. And I feel like that's what comes with the game, you know? Like, the more money, the more status you have. The more money, the more problems you have. The more money, the more women you're going to attract. And my grandmother used to always say it, too. It's, like, biblical. Like, there's going to be a point in time because men are either they're sending them to war or they're incarcerated, that there's going to be more women than men. And we're living in that time now. And when I got the call that they picked him up, and I think like the day before, I haven't seen him at this point for months. We weren't even speaking because every time like we would break up, I would leave him. It was bad. Like, and you know, nobody wins when the family feuds. Like, the kids unfortunately get the short end of the stick. Because we're not, you know, I've learned, like, even if you get divorced, you know, even if you separate, it's so important to keep a healthy relationship for the sake of the child. I think it's a beautiful thing when, like, parents are separated and they remarry, but, like, for birthdays or like, even taking vacations, like, they come together, like, they could all be together, like, one big happy family. There's, like, movies like that. Like, I think that that's amazing, and I think if you have that, like, God bless. Because so many people are living in their ego, not with love. And when I got the phone call that my son's father got arrested the day before, that's where I left off, I wrote him like a lengthy message. And honestly, it was like from God. Like, it was like just, I remember I went to court to hear like what they were going to say. And I remember like, they try to make him out to be like a monster. I'm telling you, he had a $10 million bond. $10 million? Who gets a $10 million bond, honestly? Like, if he killed someone.
Yeah, killers, violence.
Right. It was nonviolent. They gave him a $10 million bond. Insane. And I was just like, oh my, I was like dropping in I was like losing it. I was just like, my friends, mind you, like a lot of us, we all went to school together. And like, they were like picking me up, like, keep it together. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like,
Here we go again.
Yes, that's what I'm thinking. But now that I'm older, I'm like, fuck, there's two now. Like, what am I? God. And honestly, God humbled me completely to the point that, like, I lost it all again. I feel like my whole life, though, it's always been like, I get it, I get up, and then I fall back down. And then I climb back up, I get up again, and then I fall down. It's been like that kind of my whole life.
When you got involved with these individuals, did you know that they were involved in criminal behavior?
With my daughter's father, I didn't know until it was, like, happening. He basically got, I don't know how, someone told him that, like, they were coming for him. He was involved in, like, what do you call that? Like an indictment. Where
indictment.
It was like, indictment.
Yeah.
Where it was like, 20 people. There was like crazy from like Miami, Puerto Rico, New York,
Like a Rico
Florida.
case type of
Yes,
thing.
basically. And there was like a kingpin, and then it was like all his like dojers, and or like just guilty by affiliation. And I found out like a month, 2-3 months before, and I'm like, what?
Were you in denial when you found out?
I mean, it didn't really hit me until like my daughter was like 2. And then I'm like, shit, I got to get the ball. Like, you know, I was in denial for super long. I think I was in denial his whole bid, actually. Like,
That he actually did it, or
yes.
because
like,
you look at these women whose husbands, or even reverse, the husbands who have wives that are accused of crazy crimes, and that's a tough position to be in because you on one side you married this person you had no idea about, and you're trying to support them and be there through it, but on the other side the whole world is against them. It's a lot of pressure.
you know, so with my son's father, I found myself getting really angry because, we kept to ourselves. Like, I was always with the kids. He was always, doing family activities with us, whether we were together or not together. He thrived on like just, doing well for the kids and being there as much as he could because he did always want kids and he did always want a family, and we were engaged and planning a wedding, and, we were trying to get there, but we were like never on the same page. So when me and Kenny went to high school together, actually in Danbury, and so after Destiny's dad went to prison, I went to visit him one time in Valhalla. My daughter was like 1.5. And I remember I went with my friend Linda. And we went to the visit. And the girl that he told me I never had to worry about, guess who was there? That girl. Hi, Karen. She was there. And I'm like, but, I'm thinking like his friend, If this was a surprise, I popped up on him. Then I see Karen give him a kiss. And the COs at that center, they were cool. They knew me already. I was like, Linda, hold up. I passed her the baby. I went crazy on this girl. I smacked her. I dragged her. I remember her nose was bleeding. I remember the COs were like, we're going to arrest you. You got to come down. But they like let me get my hits in. And I looked at him and I was like, I am disgusted. Like, that's it. And you know what? That gave me the motivation, honestly, though, to keep going. That made it actually easier for me to like, just be like, okay, now I got to move on. But I never let go of the hurt, like, of the pain from that relationship, like, before he went in, his poor decisions that he made in that relationship with me. And up to the point, he always tried to make me feel like I was crazy. I wasn't cheating. You're insecure. I wasn't, you're this, you're that, you're nag, you're that. No, it was all right in front of me. But I wanted to be like ride or die. And after that, it made it easier for me to like move on. And I moved to Atlanta. I was like, I need to get the fuck away from here. And
That didn't last long.
before I moved to Atlanta, I had some friends in the city that I made throughout the years. And I remember there was this strip club called Sin City. You ever been there?
In Waterbury?
No, it was in the Bronx.
Oh, no, I've never been out there.
Wow, those were the days. Like, Sin City was a vibe. Like, if you know, you know. And yes, I was in there, like, underage, but whatever. I think you could have been 18 to get in, though, and 21 to drink, I think, if I'm not mistaken. Or was that Sue's? I don't know. But one day I started waitressing there. I had a job waitressing. And, like, my first night, I see these strippers just, like, and these guys just, like, I'm like, look, that's what I'm chasing, the money. So, like, the next day, I convinced my friend. We bought stripper shoes. We auditioned. They were like, if you dance, you cannot go back to waitressing. We're like, we don't care. So I remember dancing, and I remember, like, the first time I saw, like, it's like that song, Bands to Make Good Dance. Me and my friends dropped on the floor. We cashed out, like, $10,000 that night between, like, 1, 2, 3. Was it 3 of us? 3 or 4 of us. And I was like, oh, my God. The next day I went back. I'm like, let's do it again. And my uncle was there celebrating, like, his friend's birthday. I guess Sin City was the spot back then. Oh my.
And he saw you there naked.
What? His friends were like, isn't that your niece? Yo, he grabbed me by my hair so quick. And like I tripped over, it was embarrassing. I fell, cups, everything, bottles went flying in the air. He was like, what the, like he like pushed me to the back. I remember just crying and being like, I need money. Like, you know, I was so angry. I stopped believing in God at this point. And I was like, fuck that. So then I had reached out to one of my friends. One of the friends that I had made at that point, she was like, you know what we need to do? I'm like, what? She's like, we need to go to Atlanta. And I'm like, Atlanta, Georgia? She was like, yes. And I'm like, I was thinking more Miami, you know, near the beach. She was like, no, Atlanta, that's where it's at. So I come home and I'm like, Mom, I'm moving to Atlanta. She's like, are you crazy? She's like, no, well, let's keep Destiny here and then you go back and forth once you get settled. So I was like, bam. So I go to Atlanta. Yo, the A totally showed me a lot. And you know, out there, it's more common, sad to say, for like the husbands or the baby dads or the boyfriends to be incarcerated, you know? And I felt almost like I was home. I always say Atlanta is like my home away from home. Like there's no judgment. Like everyone's in their own little lane, in their own little world. Well, this was Atlanta back then. I don't know how Atlanta is now. But it did not last that long. I was out there though for like 4 years and then 3 years. And then I ended up moving back because I met a guy and that's another story. But when I moved back, it was like the holidays. I was like home visiting family and I bumped into Kenny. We were like at Square One and he was like, mind you, I haven't seen him since high school. Like growing up, I used to hate him because he used to throw rocks at me. Like he had a sister, rest in peace. She died a few years back. But his sister and my cousin were like super close. So I remember just telling like his sister, like, oh my God, I hate your brother. Like, why is he so annoying? She would always be like, he likes you. I'm like, ugh. I was like, no, he doesn't. He's always picking at me. He's always making fun of me. Like, I remember like in high school one time, he threw like a paper plane at my head and I was so embarrassed because it was like in the lunchroom and I wanted to kill him. And he just like ran. And after that, I was like, I just like wrote him off. So here we are. We're like oh my God, I was young, in my early 20s. And I bump into him and he was like, what's up, Anna? And I'm like, Kenny? I was like, oh my God. And it was like he got the girl, he was trying to get the girl he always wanted. And then I looked at him like, what do you want? Like, you're gonna throw rocks at me? And he remembered, like, he has a smile. He always had like a really nice smile. And I remember like from our first date, there were some red flags, but I ended up just like, I fell in love with, at the time he lived with his mother. I don't even think he had a car. And he was so sweet to his mother. Like I remember his mother would love to talk. Till this day, Fifth, I love to talk. She cooks her ass off and she cooks really good and she loves to talk. And he would just sit there and talk to her and like let her speak and let her talk about, let her vent about like what the ladies like, you know, were saying or whatever, you know, the gossip, you know, and the family, whatever. And like he would just always hear her out. And I fell in love with that because I always wanted, like I told you, I didn't have that growing up, like a family, you know, like a mom that, me and my mother were never that close growing up. So I was closer to like my older cousins, but after they, you know, got older and got married and, you know, I moved away and a lot of my family went against with what I was doing or they didn't know and then, or they found out and then it was, you know, like controversy in the family. Like I was always kind of like the black sheep. So I felt like with Kenny, he more like understood me. And then he's like, where's her father? And I'm like, he's in prison. And he was like, damn, how long? And I'm like, 10 years. He's like, and then I think he like kind of just took the initiative and like stepped up and played that role, like for her. Like, like the father that she didn't have.
So why would you think he would put himself in a position to go into prison then?
You know, I don't know. His brother once told me that Kenny's super smart, like very, very intelligent. His mother told me that he like went to college and like the first month he like dropped out. Like he was just like, this is not like for me. I don't know. Like he just wanted like, you know, faster money. And he ended up like dropping out. But his brother told me when he was younger, he used to get, you know, the cassette players and he used to put like beats and he used to rap. And honestly, like, I feel like the music, like, yes, I love rap. I listen to everything. My playlist is, like, everything from, like, country to pop to, like, everything, techno, house, you know? And, like, I think he thought that he was a rapper, but he never showed me the side of him. That was, like, the geeky side of him, you know? Kenny always tried to be, like, cool and nonchalant and laid back, and he had, like, this whole other side of him that, like, I don't even think I ever really got to see the real him. I feel like I was close to it, but I feel like he had also had a lot of hurt. And I remind you, I didn't see Kenny in years. Like Kenny before that had went to jail for like a year for like drugs, and his sister passed away that year when he was in jail. And I think they give you the option if you want to go or not go, and he chose to not go. And him and his sister were very close. And I think, you know, till this day, that's something he had to deal with, you know, and his father is around, but growing up, his father wasn't around. The mother tells me stories all the time. Like, he ended up being just like his dad, like, with the women and, you know. And she went through a lot. And now, with like the knowledge that I have, she was doing her best. And she's been more like a mother to me. And like, thank God for her, because she helps me tremendously, like with my son. But here I am again, and I'm seeing like how it's affecting the family. Like, that poor woman probably aged like another 10 years in a year.
Yeah.
And I try to like slow down, and I go there, and like she's always cooking, and you know, I'll bring my little bottle of wine and I'll just sit there and listen to her, and you know, it's been very, very, very hard. And not knowing the outcome. Like I said, I don't feel like his trial is even, his case is fair. Like a $10 million bond, it doesn't make sense.
Were there things that you did with your daughter having an incarcerated father that you learned since then and plan on doing differently with your son, who now has an incarcerated father?
Yes. I feel like planning one weekend out the month to go and visit him wherever they put him. I'm gonna, as he gets older, or even now, start like helping him write letters to his father, communicating with him, and, you know, opening up, like writing his emotions. So, and helping him express and how he feels is okay. Because every day isn't easy. Like, I remember with my daughter, like, sometimes she would break down and cry. Or, like, if we were somewhere and, like, you know, you see, like, a daughter with her father, and, like, she wouldn't say anything, but I could see it. Because growing up, I used to, like, resent my father so much for not being around. And my father had 10 daughters. 10 daughters by 10 different women. He wasn't there for none of us.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
Do you think that psychology kind of transfers to you, which kind of leads you to picking the men that you end up choosing?
Absolutely. You know, I never connected it like that until now that, like, I mean, Kenny fucked me up so bad. Like, out of, like, he was the one who, like, boop, 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 got my passcode, and, like...
We all have that one person.
Do we?
I think everyone goes through it.
He put me through it. He really did. And I got a therapist last year. Dennis, I love him.
Shout out to Dennis.
Shout out to Dennis. He's amazing. I love him. And he's been helping me, like, just embrace, you know, my story and the things that happened to me from, like, adolescence until now. And yes, like, I think with the men that I've chosen, it was like me looking for love in all the wrong places. And then me trying to be loyal or me trying to hold on because I don't feel like no one in my life truly ever fought for me.
What advice would you give to the woman or the men, because the men do go through this too? We've had some prison female inmates on the show who have had husbands. What advice would you give to them that are going through a situation that was and is similar to yours?
Like one's inside and the other one's out?
Yeah, like they're having to raise a child on the outside. They're navigating. Maybe their husband or wife just got arrested and they're faced with whether they support them or not. And then you have a kid in the mix, and how do you work out visitations? What general advice would you give to these individuals just to make it through it?
It's hard. You know, it's hard. And it does take a village. And it is okay to ask for help. And it is okay to cry and to let it out. It is okay to, you know, feel your emotions and not suppress them or hide them or keep them in a box and that you're carrying that you don't even realize you're carrying. And at the end of the day, that's their mother, that's their father. Who are we to say, oh, you made this poor decision, no, you're cut off. You want to just encourage them to learn and to grow. You know, I feel like I've done a lot of digging and searching and soul searching and trying to get grounded. Like, I mean, I started doing yoga. I started doing green juice. I started taking ginger shots. Like, one day I prayed to God so hard. And, like, when I woke up, like, God, like, I had, like, this download, like, you need to fast for 3 days. No eating, no drinking, just fast. And I meditated by the third day. And I journaled all this. And it's weird because I was telling this to, like, a friend. They're like, they say you should journal it. I'm like, really? I'm like, I don't know why. I just started. But I've been into that lately, like just writing, trying to be more organized, getting ready for my podcast and things that I want to talk about. So I just started journaling it. And by the third day, like, I feel like I snapped out of the matrix. And I'm seeing so much clearer. Like, I have astigmatism. I'm literally seeing so much clearer. And it healed a part of me. I feel like I'm not where I want to be, but I know I'm on the direction where I need to be. I know that now. And I understand that the things that I went through from, like, my daughter's father, from having my daughter until, like, my son now, this is all for a greater purpose. I didn't really know what I was searching for, but I always knew I wanted a family. And not every family looks like a husband and wife and their children. Sometimes it's just a mom and her 2 kids. And right now, like, those are the ones I'm fighting for. And my son loves his dad. My daughter loves his dad. Shit, I still love his dad. So all you can do is just be there, really support them, and help them understand what they weren't. Like, sometimes, unfortunately, it takes someone to lose it all to start appreciating what they had. Or it's probably what they always wanted, but they weren't appreciating it. They were either caught in, like, the matrix or their ego that they were like, wow, I have a beautiful son. Wow, God gave me a beautiful stepdaughter. Wow, a beautiful wife. But, like, you know, just a family. This is, you know, the American dream, but doing it the right way. And I think that's beautiful that you're, like, interning and you're mentoring with these children. It takes a village.
Thank you, Annie. I appreciate the kind words. And I appreciate you coming on the show today to share your perspective. And hopefully this helps someone that's listening on the show, which I think it will, because there's a lot of people that often, as we said before, go unheard and their voices go unheard who are in similar situations. Yeah,
and these aren't bad people. I don't think that... I know for a fact my son's father's not a bad person. He just got handled like, you know, like bad cards at a poker table, and he tried his best hand, you know, what he could at the time. And it's just so important, like, going within and doing the healing. I feel like if we target the traumas, the baggage you're carrying, the negativity, and you take it away and you follow, you know, whatever religion. I was every religion too at one point. I was like Muslim for a little bit. I was just like everything. I was all over the place trying to find like where I fit in. As long as you believe in God, the universe, love, like love is God, God is love, the universe is one. And as long as you're good to yourself and good to the souls, the people around you, God will inline you. He will put you exactly where you need to be and your voice to be heard where it needs to be heard. And I hope this does touch someone or two, and it makes them just, you know, you really shouldn't judge a book by its cover. You really don't know the layers and layers and layers of, you know, things that life has like fetched them. And unfortunately, this is one that I'm dealing with, and I'm still dealing with it. But I'm learning so much, and I know God has a bigger purpose.